Hello, everybody, and welcome to Mike on Monday. I'll just share my screen and tell you what we're going to discuss today. Just 1 second. Right, today we're going to do the inspection revisited. The reason for this is I'm getting lots of emails and contact from members, still a little bit confused as to what they need to do in relation to the inspection. It's fair to say at the moment that the majority of people are failing the inspection and being found non-compliant. So I've just put together a few questions that you perhaps could ask yourself in relation into your practice and whether you've got certain things in place. I know I've mentioned this in the past on various Mike on Monday. But I thought if I put this together, just a couple of questions that you can ask yourself whether you've got these in place. It'll help you to be compliant to the legislation, and should you be selected for inspection, you'll be confident, hopefully, that it'll be a positive outcome for yourselves. So, first of all, does your practice license reflect the structure of my practice, i.e. sole trader limited company partnership? That's important because what we're finding on inspection is some people may have told ICB that they're a sole trader or a limited company or partnership, and they've got their practice license in the name of the limited company, and perhaps you've changed back to a sole trader, or you've gone the other way from a sole trader to a limited company. It is important that you notify ICB so that you can get your practice license changed to what your company is actually doing. Because if you've got a practice license that says you're a sole trader, your ICB will give you that license as a sole trader. If you then change to that limited company, you're actually practicing without a license because it's a sole trader that has got the license. So just have a check to make sure that your practice license reflects that structure of your practice. And if it doesn't, if you contact ICB member services and explain that it needs changing. That's one of the things that we're coming up against when we do the inspections. Again, I know I repeat this all the time, but are all my clients on AML Online? I'm still finding that lots and lots of members are not putting, in some cases, any of their clients on AML Online, or they're missing some clients off there. And if you're doing work for clients, whether it be family or friends, and you're not charging them for your service, they are still a client for the purposes of the money laundering regulations. So in your capacity as a bookkeeper, if you're doing the books for your husband, wife, son, daughter, partner, whatever it may be, and you do not charge them, so you've not got them on AML Online, it is important that you put them onto AML Online, irrespective that you do not charge them a fee. Again, I'm seeing that time and time again where we do the inspections, and it's identified that some clients aren't on their AML Online. I completed a practice risk assessment. Again, you'll have heard me going on about this week in and week out about a practice risk assessment. Once all your clients are on AML Online, so AML Online will risk assess your clients. It'll tell you what the risk is of that client, whether it be high, medium or low. You've then got to look at your practice. Having looked at your clients, look at your practice and see what the risks are in relation to your practice from having those clients as clients, and taking into account that the risks they may pose to you and your practice in relation to money laundering. Again, that is something that is amiss in lots of inspections, and there is a template to complete this on ICB website, and there's also a template showing you exactly how to fill that in. It's a fictitious company, and it goes through the scenario of how to do a practice risk assessment. What I will ask is that if you do use that scenario and as an example, don't copy it verbatim into your practice risk assessment, because there have been times when people have copied that into their risk assessment and it has had no bearing whatsoever on their practice. So does my risk assessment identify the risks associated with my practice? Again, just ask yourself that question. You may have identified risks, but are they in your practice risk assessment? If you're a trusted company service provider, that is classed as a high risk service. So you need to put that as a risk identified into your practice risk assessment. Do you have any politically exposed persons as clients? Again, potentially high risk. Again, you need to identify that in your risk assessment. And any other such things like cash clients. If somebody deals predominantly in cash, again, high risk. Is it in your risk assessment? And have all my clients been reviewed within the last 12 months? And that means reviewed them on AML Online. You should review your clients on an ongoing basis in case there are any changes, but in any case, within that 12-month period, you need to make sure that you update your AML Online, that you have done that. If you don't, it shows that your clients haven't been reviewed, and that could activate an inspection of your practice. So make sure when you check your AML Online that everything has been updated within the last 12 months. Again, I'm seeing time and time again where people are not, members are not updating their clients, and in some cases they're years out of date. Sometimes members will have them on a standalone system, but and review them on the standalone system, which you may well do, and that may well show that you're conforming to the legislation by reviewing your clients on a 12-monthly basis. However, it is a condition of membership of the ICB that your clients are on AML Online, so you need to be updating them on there as well. Have I completed an AML policies and procedures statement? Again, there's a pro forma document on the ICB website. Again, we're seeing that this time and time again, this isn't being completed. Make sure you complete your policies and procedures statement, and also you need to that policies and procedures statements needs to show how you're going to mitigate the risks that are shown in your practice risk assessment. Now, some people will mitigate risks actually in their practice risk assessment, and if that's what you wish to do, that's fine. So your practice risk assessment will show the risks you've identified, and as long as you're showing how you're going to mitigate those risks, whether it be in your practice risk assessment or in your policies and procedures statement, that's a matter for you. But as long as we can see that you've mitigated somewhere, those documents are in the process of being reviewed by Steve Hardwick, Director of Compliance, and perhaps putting them into one single document, your whole of firm risk assessment and your policies and procedures statements as one document, to try and make it a little bit easier, more straightforward for you to complete. But you need to identify the risks and show how you're going to mitigate them. Again, we're seeing people identifying the risks, which is fantastic, but then not saying how they're going to mitigate them. So it's important that you do show that mitigation. And does it reflect the risks identified in your risk assessment? Again, I've jumped the gun there. That's what I've just been talking about, making sure that you've identified those risks that you've identified in your risk assessment. Does senior management have oversight of the AML program? Make sure, and again, if you're a sole trader, it's you. But if you're a limited company, a partnership, etc., then make sure that there's a senior manager that has been appointed for the AML to oversight of the AML program. In most cases, I'm finding it's the member, but just make sure that we know who that person is. And do I review my AML policies and procedures on an annual basis? Again, your policies and procedures and your whole of firm risk assessment should be reviewed. And you can, a lot of these are reviewed on an ongoing basis, but in any case, make sure they're reviewed on an annual basis. And there's a pro forma there on the ICB website that you can use for that reason. And just make sure that you looked at your policies. Has anything changed? You may have been a TCSP provider. You may decide not to provide that service. So therefore, that risk has been removed from your whole firm risk assessment. Just make sure you keep on top of it. Make sure that it says what you are actually doing. Again, we're finding when I'm doing inspections, I can read a whole of firm risk assessment, and some of the risks identified haven't been risks for the last 18 months or to 2 years. They need removing. It needs refreshing. It's a living document if you just keep on top of it. Has the MLRO been notified to ICB within 14 days? That's a requirement of the legislation. If you're going to nominate a different MLRO to what ICB are aware of, they've got to be notified within 14 days of appointment, because ICB have to approve them holding that position. So ensure that you carry out that. Do I have knowledge of the money laundering regulations and my obligations? Again, this is tested on inspection, and a lot of the time members are aware of certain aspects of it, but you need to have that knowledge of the money laundering regulations, and in particular what your obligations are, which are these whole of firm risk assessment, etc. What we've been talking about. But you need to have that knowledge, and that knowledge is tested during an inspection. Have I got training records for myself and all staff and contractors? Again, another important one. You need to be able to show that you're providing training for your staff, for yourself initially, and for your staff, but also for your contractors, and hold a training record for those people. Make sure that you've got those completed. Make sure that it's accessible when you're inspected, and it includes everything that needs to be on there. By all means, put Mike on Mondays down there as a training session, and just make sure they're up to date. Is CDD due diligence carried out before the commencement of any business relationship? Again, this is another one where members are falling down on. They'll have a new client come to them, and before they've confirmed the identity of that potential client, they've started doing a little bit of work for them before they've actually confirmed the identity. It is so important that you carry out that due diligence before you do any business with them at all. There's been a couple of occasions recently where people have carried out some business before confirming identity, and then the person's walked away from them. So that the member has been left in the position where they've done some work for somebody, not proved their identity. Were they legitimate? We don't know. We may never know. So make sure that due diligence is carried out before. Do I fully understand the nature of the client's business activities? Again, another area where members are falling down. You'll be asked during your inspection in relation to some of your clients. Your client files will be dip sampled, and you'll be asked, for argument's sake, Mike Jardine Limited, if that was one of your clients, what does Mike Jardine Limited do? What's Mike Jardine all about? And again, I'm finding that those questions are asked of members, and some clients, they don't really know what their business activities are. And as I've said before, you need to really understand your clients inside out and their business to be able to identify those risks that they may pose to you in your practice. Have I identified and verified all directors and persons with significant control of corporate clients? Again, extremely important that you identify who all the directors are, who the person with significant control is, and if the person with significant control is another limited company or another entity other than a named individual, make sure you follow the trail back until you get to a natural person. Somebody that has got control of the business. Again, we're seeing failings in relation to that, where members will identify the directors of Mike Jardine Limited and the person with significant control. But if the person with significant control was another limited company, you've got to look at that other limited company. You've then got to look at the structure of that company. And if the person with significant control of that second company is yet another limited company, you've got to look at that. You've got to understand the full structure and carry out your due diligence in relation to all the corporate entities. Do I complete ongoing monitoring of my client's business relationship? Again, extremely important, and part of the legislation, you must continue your ongoing monitoring of your client business relationship. Understand what the norm is. If you can understand what the norm is, then when it becomes abnormal, it'll alert you. It'll be a red flag. So when you see that those transactions have suddenly changed, that's normally they're ABC, but all of a sudden you've got DEF, and you think, well, that's not normal. Then you can start thinking to yourself, is this suspicious? Is it money laundering? You can ask the question of the client. I've seen these transactions. What's the score with this? Is this right? And you may get an explanation that you're quite happy with, but it may be that you get an explanation that you're not happy with. But then at least you by knowing what the norm is, you'll be able to see what the abnormal is. So you've got to keep that ongoing monitoring of your client business activity. Was I aware that I am required to report discrepancies in the beneficial ownership of corporate clients when establishing a business relationship? This is a new section which came in last year. If you're taking on a new client and you look at the person with significant control tab and it's different to what the client's telling you, you need to establish what the truth is. If it's different, you've got a legal obligation to notify Companies House and report that discrepancy in relation to the beneficial ownership person with significant control. This is all about Companies House trying to make sure that the information that is held within Companies House is accurate and we can rely upon it. So that onus has been placed on the accountancy sector as well as other sectors, that if you see something that's not right and you've discussed it with the client and it needs changing, you've got that obligation to notify. And on the ICB website, there is the form that you need to fill out to send to Companies House that you can just download and forward it on. Am I on the Trust and Company Service Provider register if I provide these services? Again, this is important. If you provide the services of Trust and Company Service Provider, even merely using your address as a registered address for your client, you need to be on that register. Failure to do so is a criminal offence. And again, time and time again, I'm seeing at the moment where people are falling foul of this one. Make sure if you provide these services that you've notified ICB that you provide these services and that you want to be placed onto the TCSP register. It's so important that you go on there. And as part of the process, when if you're selected for an inspection, the Intelligence and Research Officer will have a look at your the address of your practice to see if there are any corporate clients registered to that address. And if there are corporate clients registered to that address and you're shown to not be on the TCSP register, then obviously it's going to cause a problem in the future for you. Have all booms of the practice been approved and the DBS provided to ICB? Business owners and office managers, if somebody holds a position in relation to that, make sure that you've provided ICB with a DBS certificate. And that includes if you're a corporate entity, if your practice is a corporate entity, that all directors and people in those positions, you provided a DBS certificate. Again, this is where we're seeing some failings in relation to somebody may have the practice license and a member of the family may be a director, but not involved in any way with the practice. You've still got to show, because they're involved in the practice as a limited company, you've still got to show that they're a person of good character. And the way we do that is providing a DBS certificate. So again, just check that you've done that. Do I keep client records following the end of a business relationship for 5 years? Very important that you do. As I say, the legislation says you need to keep them. These are your due diligence records for 5 years. If you're inspected and a dip sample of your clients is taking place, not only will that be a dip sample of your current clients, but we may dip sample some of your ex-clients. So we may ask to see ex-clients file from say 4 years ago, and we'll be expecting to see the correct documentation in that file because you've got to keep it for 5 years. Again, that's a failing that's is occurring on a regular basis where those documents haven't been kept. Do I comply with the DPA, Data Protection Act principles, and provide new customers with the following information? You've got to tell any new customers that any personal data received from the customer will be processed only for the purposes of preventing money laundering or terrorist financing. That's the legal requirement that you've got, that you're allowed to keep their information for that purpose. I've had a couple of occasions recently where some clients have refused to give their identification documents and address verification documents to members because they've said that it's in breach of GDPR. That part of the legislation, I think it's Regulation 40, allows you to do that. It allows you to hold that information and not be in breach of any of the GDPR data protection principles. So just make sure you comply with that. Am I aware of how to report suspicion of money laundering and who to? Again, vitally important, if you're suspicious, that you know how to report that suspicion. You need to know that it's reported to the National Crime Agency. Again, on inspection, regular thing where people don't know how to report suspicion or who to. And I've had a range of reasons as to where it should be reported to, but it's to be reported online to the National Crime Agency. Am I aware of who I can talk to about submitting the SAR? Again, very important as to knowing about the confidentiality aspect of submitting a suspicious activity report. So important. If you discuss it with somebody that you shouldn't discuss it with, you possibility that you may be committing an offence of what they call tipping off. You certainly don't tell the client that you're submitting a suspicious activity report on the client, which unfortunately some people have done. You can speak to the ICB in relation to it, and you can speak to the National Crime Agency in relation to it. Once you've submitted a SAR, they may come back to you to ask you further information. Just make sure that you're aware of that, the confidentiality aspect of the submitting of a SAR. Am I aware of what I would do with a client after submitting a SAR? Again, very important. It's a matter for you if you wish to continue your business relationship with that person. After all, you're reporting suspicion. It may be that your suspicion is ultimately not founded, but it's a matter for you what you do with your client. If you decide to keep your client as a client after submitting a SAR, make sure you revisit your due diligence. Make sure everything's right with the due diligence. If you decide that you're going to cease that business relationship with that client because you've submitted a SAR, just make sure you have a reasonable exit strategy so as that you don't tip them off. And again, I've had it in the past where people have said, I've told the client that I think they're money laundering, so I don't want them as a client anymore. Big no-no. You can't tell them that that's the reason. You've got to think of a way to exiting that relationship without tipping them off. And again, if you need any advice about that, you can speak to me or one of the other inspectors. It's something we can just discuss if you need any help with that. But if you wish to continue your business relationship with them, that's absolutely fine. But what you've got to be aware of, if you see another suspicious transaction or something else suspicious, you've got to report it again. You can't just submit a SAR on one occasion, and then if it happens again, not submit it. You have to submit another one if you're suspicious again. Do I know what a PEP is, and do I have any as clients? Again, we'll ask this question of members when we do an inspection. Do you know what a politically exposed person is? Some people know, some people don't know. And then the next question will be, do you have any as clients? And most people say, no, we don't have any as clients. And I'll say, okay, well, how do you know you haven't got any as clients? Answer back was, well, I don't really, I just don't think I have. What you need to do, you need to make sure whether you've got any clients are PEPs, politically exposed persons. Do I know the requirements of having a PEP as a client? Again, if you've got a PEP as a client, there's certain things that you have to do. You have to do enhanced due diligence in relation to that client. And then when that person ceases to become a PEP, as I've discussed on previous Michael Mondays, when that person ceases becoming a PEP, you still have some obligations in relation to your enhanced due diligence for a further 12 months. Do I know if any of my clients are active in high risk countries? Again, that's a question that you'll be asked on an inspection. And a lot of people say, I don't know. Well, you need to know. You need to know where you, and it goes back to what we said before about your due diligence. Understand what your client's business is, where they're working, what they're doing, where they're selling their goods to, etc. You need to know if they're active in any high risk countries, because you need to do your further enhanced due diligence if they are active in these high risk countries. And if you don't know, you won't be doing your enhanced due diligence, and you may fall foul of that. So that was just a brief overview about some of the questions you can ask yourself. Now, any of those questions, if the answer to any of those questions was no, then, and you were being inspected, you would have failed your inspection. So have a look at those questions, think to yourself, answer them truthfully to yourself, and if the answer is no, do something about it and make the answer yes. Any help you need with that, as always, you know my email. You can drop me an email, and I'll give you a call, and we can discuss through it. But it's a case of understanding what your obligations are, understanding that legislation, understanding that, and it's not just about understanding it just so you can pass an inspection. You need to understand it so you know what you're doing is right and what you're doing maybe is wrong. These are little short snapshots of the legislation, but you need to understand the legislation. There's lots of information, I've said before, which I'm sure lots of you have seen already on the ICB website, on the links. The Mike's Mondays are all on there. If you go onto the resources tab, MLR, at the bottom right hand corner, it says AML webinars. You can review these. Drop me an email, ask me a question. We're there to help you, to make sure that you understand the legislation so you don't fall foul of it. And yes, so if you're inspected, you'll pass the inspection. That's great. If anyone's got any questions, happy to answer them.
Great, thanks, Mike. There are a few questions here. So first one from David. Hi, David. What about the work you do for your own business? Do you have a list of your own business? Do you have a list of your own businesses on the AML online? Yeah,
if you're doing work with that, put them on there. There's no harm in being put there. What I've been finding is lots of people have perhaps directorships in another business, or they're director, but because of their position as a bookkeeper, they're doing the books for free and being director of their own business for something else. So yeah, put them on there. There's no harm with them being on there. You'll be able to see what the risk rating comes out as. But yeah, put everything on. If you're in doubt, give me a call. We can go through it. Or if you're in doubt, you don't want to speak to me, then put it onto AML on that. I'd rather it be on there than not be on there. And then if you're inspected, we can say, okay, that doesn't need to be on there, rather than it not being on there. Because if they're not on there and you're inspected and it should be, then you'll unfortunately you'd fail your inspection.
Great. And then a question from Peter. If I lose a client before I ever put them on AML online, do I have to put them on retrospectively?
I would say no. If you've got if you're onboarding somebody and you're getting all your documentation in and you're weighing up whether they're going to be a client or not, and then they decide not to be a client, then you've got all your information. You've obviously started a file off them. I don't think you need to put them on there because they're not a client. They've never have been a client. You can put them on there because you only put them on there because they're a client. So if you've got to the stage where they decide to exit before they've even joined, then there's no need to put them on there.
Right. And then a question from Natalie. How often should we do our practice risk assessment?
Right, your practice risk assessment, it's a living document. It's an ongoing document. Some people will do it quarterly. What you need to do is make sure you review it on at least an annual basis. As I say, some people will do it quarterly. Some people, if there's a change in circumstances, if they lose a client, because your practice risk assessment should say how many clients you've got and how many are high risk, medium risk, low risk, etc. Some people will, if they lose a client, they'll update the practice risk assessment. If they gain another one, they'll update the practice risk assessment. But you need to make sure that you capture any change in risk. So if you've got a practice risk assessment and it's not showing, say, a cash rich business as a risk to your practice, and then you go and take on a cash rich client in relation to their business, then that is a risk that you need to show how you're going to mitigate that risk. So it's a living document. So you do need to review it, to keep it under review all the time. And if there are any major changes, you need to make those changes. but you must do it within 12 months. But I would go further than that and say if it's a change in risk, you need to note that risk on there and mitigate that risk.
Great. And then we have an anonymous. I have a client that has 2 companies, both of which I do the bookkeeping for. The companies have now merged with another company. I don't do the bookkeeping for that company. I don't believe there are any plans to merge the bookkeeping / accounts. I believe it is only the final accounts that are consolidated. Do any AML obligations arise here in regards to the other company? I've already checked them out on Companies House, but I've not yet asked for their shareholders' ID. Is this necessary when I don't have access to their books?
Right. It may be worthwhile me speaking in person to that one, because it's quite a long question. That it all depends who is your client in relation to that. It's your client that needs to go on AML online, and then your client, you need to do due diligence on your client. So if your client, how many directors are there, who's the person with significant control, I'd have to know a bit more about the structure, the structure of the 2 companies and the third that it's merged with, before I could give you a definitive answer on that. So if you want to drop me an email to Jardine@bookkeepers.org.uk, and I'll give you a call and we can talk through it.
Great. And then do I have to renew a client's ID, e.g. utility bill, every 12 months as part of the risk assessment?
No, in relation to your client due diligence, you just have to make sure if you've used your photographic ID, if it expires, you need to get a new photographic ID once that one has expired. For argument's sake, if the passport's expired, you need to update that. In relation to address verification, so therefore your utility bill, there is no need to renew that utility bill unless you know that they've moved. So if you've got a client that's lived somewhere for the last 6 years and you've proved that they live there, you've had a utility bill from 6 years ago, and you know that they haven't moved, there is no need to renew that address verification.
Right. And then what is the definition of a PWSC?
Well, that's the person with significant control. Anybody with over 25% shareholding. So if you go into Companies House, next to the officers tab, there'll be a person with significant control, and that will show you all the people that have got over 25%. There are anomalies to that in relation to voting rights, etc. But in the main, it's over 25%. And they're the people, persons of significant control.
Okay. Where you say, have I identified all directors and PWFC or corporate clients? I've been told by ICB it is only the shareholders owning more than 25% shareholding that we need to risk assess. I have this in writing. Although I am always aware of the company structure, I don't ask for ID, etc. from directors. This seems to be conflicting advice.
Right. Well, if you could send me that advice, I'd be interested to see that. That'd be great. What you have to do, you have to do your due diligence on all your directors of the limited company and the persons with significant control. And persons with significant control are people that have more than 25%. So if you've got Mike Jardine Limited, and I've got there's 4 directors of my company, you have to do your due diligence on all 4 directors. And if there's one person that's got significant control, just me, then you're totally covered. If that person with significant control happened to be, for argument's sake, a friend of mine that's got control of it, you'd have to do the due diligence on them as well. So it's all the directors and the persons with significant control. But if you've had that, if you could forward that to me or drop me an email and we can have a chat about it, that's absolutely fine.
Great, thanks. And then so question from Magali. Hi Magali. Hi Mike. How do we know if we are on the TCSP register?
Again, in I think it was 2018, ICB emailed all members to ask them if they provided the services of a TCSP, and you filled in the questionnaire and you were placed on the register. You'd have to contact ICB to ask them if your practice was listed on there.
Great. And then got a question from someone called Lab. How long does a DBS certificate last before you have to redo it?
At this moment in time, there is no requirement to further submit another DBS certificate. Once you've submitted it once, at this current time, that is the only time you need to do that. You don't need to do it again.
Great. And then, so a question from Lisa about HR countries and some other questions. We're only expected to view the business, not the individual, right?
So say that one again.
So about HR countries and some other questions, we're only expected to view the business, not the individual, right?
I don't really follow that, Lisa. That one. So.
Well, Lucy's saying, so about HR countries, we're only expected to view the business and not the individual. She's asking if that's correct.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I'm not really sure what the basis of the when you say to view the business and not the individual. Perhaps Lisa, I'll give you a call later and we'll discuss that. I'm not really quite sure what it is you're asking there.
Great. And then a question from Alan. Hi, Mike. Do we get the copies of your slides? This episode and all the other episodes of Mike on Monday will be on our website. This one will be on the website today, and all the rest of them are already on there. I'll put the link into the chat, and so you'll be able to access all of them from there. So a question from Susanna Whelan. What is the best way of checking whether someone is a PEP or related associate to one? Currently I use Google, but is this enough?
Yeah, the best way in relation to a PEP is first of all ask them, but be prepared for the next question coming from them asking you what a PEP is. So be prepared for that. So ask them if they're a PEP, and then do some open source research, i.e. Google. That's where you're not expected to do anything further than that. Ask the question, bit of research. If you're using a electronic verification, some of those will check whether people are PEPs, but their threshold for PEP sometimes is a little bit different. And sometimes I've seen recently where there's been some historic information held on that electronic verification where they've said people are PEPs and they in fact weren't a PEP from 5-6 years ago. So yeah, that's absolutely fine what you're doing, but also ask them, ask the question.
A question from Beverly. Do you have to renew your DBS check periodically, say every 3 years, or is it just a once?
Again, going back to the other one, once you've submitted your DBS certificate, at this current time, that is all you need to do, just on one occasion at this time.
Great. And then how do you find out if someone is a PEP? Do you just ask them?
Again, going back to the previous question, ask them if they are. Open research, Google them to see if they are. That's the expectation that you do. But as I say, asking them is your first port of call.
Great. And then I'm a PTA treasurer and a trustee of a charity. Do they need to be do they need to be on AML Online? And do I need to register with TCSP? Yeah. Do I need to register with TCSP?
So I'm assuming that by that, if you're doing some bookkeeping work for them as the treasurer, then they'll need to be on AML Online to show them as a client, whether you're getting paid for them or not, because you're doing it within your capacity of bookkeeping. And it depends exactly what you're doing in relation to the TCSP, to go on the TCSP register. Again, if you want to drop me an email, I'll give you a call and we can discuss exactly what services you are providing and whether you need to go onto that register.
Great. And another question from Lisa. Hi, Lisa. I'm not always sure why the AML Online comes back with a certain risk of a client. Is there any way to get information on that?
I'm assuming there, Lisa, you're saying it comes back with a certain risk, whether it be high, medium or low. Obviously, there's some algorithms working in the background to say what they are, whether they come back as high, medium and low. Again, I'll take that one away with me because I'm not sure whether that information is held in the background as to why somebody's come out at that risk level. So again, when I give you a call later, Lisa, I'll get that information in relation to a particular client if you've got an example, and have a look to see if that information is held as to why.
So with regards to the photo ID, I have a few clients who have the passports whose passports have expired this year. However, when I have contacted the clients for a replacement and they have not renewed the passport, as they are not planning on travelling until the COVID situation looks better, am I okay to hold the expired photo or ask for another type of photo ID? I'm talking about people who have no driving license, so that's not an option.
Yeah, I mean, again, due to the circumstances with COVID, etc., I've had this recently with an inspection. If there's no other form of photographic ID, you've got some people have started using shotgun license, firearms license certificates, which can be used. But in these circumstances, you've got to be a bit pragmatic about it. Keep hold of the copy passport that's expired. Make a note on your client file as to the reason why it's not been renewed because of the COVID situation, and then look to when they get their passport to get a copy going forward. If there's no other photographic ID, just make a note on your file as to why you've done it. Then, if you are inspected and that client should be picked out for checking, you can say the passport's expired, but this is the reason why. And I've tried to get some other ID, but I've not been able to at this moment in time. Just make a note of the reasons why.
Question from Judith. So if you find out something about someone who is not a client, do we still have to do a SAR?
Yeah, anybody can submit a SAR. Anybody at all. So if you've identified something that you think is suspicious and you think is money laundering, you can go onto the NCA portal and submit a SAR.
Great. And then so I provide payroll services for parish council just for the parish clerk. Would I need to do due diligence on each of the councillors or just the chairman, and would they be considered PEPs?
They're not considered PEPs. In previous years, they would have been before the changes in the legislation. But yeah, if you do your due diligence, have a look at the people within the parish council who've got access to the funds. So if you look at perhaps the chairman, the treasurer, have a look at the people that may have that access, that may be in a position to launder money through the processes of the parish council.
Great. And then I believe our final question from Claire. Can I just check that I understood that answer correctly? Are you supposed to put yourself and your own bookkeeping business on AML online?
That's going back to the question that we said before. No, you don't. I may give you the wrong steer there. Not your own bookkeeping practice, but if you're a director of another business and you're providing bookkeeping services for that business as that, then that company needs to go on there, but not your own bookkeeping practice that you've got your practice license for. You don't know.
Great, thanks, Mike. And I think that concludes the webinar. So as I said, this will be up on the website today, and I'll put a link into the chat. But it's under resources, MLR, and then AML webinars. Okay, everyone. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.